About Chapter 16. Chapter 16 is all about immunity, and my PhD is in biomedical science, but my specialty is immunity. That's what I went to grad school for, what I was studying in research labs in Connecticut before coming to Holton, back to Holton. So the lymphatic system is a vast collection of cells and biochemicals that travel through the lymphatic vessels. It's a network of vessels that assist in circulating the fluid. It's closely associated with the cardiovascular system. In fact, this set of tubes runs pretty much parallel to the cardiovascular system, and it picks up fluid that's been lost from the cardiovascular system. It transports that excess fluid away from the interstitial spaces and returns it to the bloodstream. It's got other jobs. It's also important in absorbing lipids from the digestive system and transporting them to the bloodstream. And it is a major way that cells involved in protecting us against disease move around and monitor the body. The immune system is the fact that many cells of the lymphatic system provide both defense against disease and permanent immunity against future infections. So lymphatic pathway includes lymphatic capillaries, lymphatic vessels, lymph nodes, larger lymphatic vessels, lymphatic trunks, which go to lymphatic collecting ducts, which come to the subclavian veins in the thorax. So the lymphatic system's main purpose is to, as far as the lymphatics go, is to carry excess fluid from the interstitial spaces and return it to the bloodstream. Remember, the circulatory system was supposed to be a closed system. Anything that does get out gets picked up by the lymphatic system, and the lymphatic system returns them to the circulatory system. That also involves some of the digestion, and those are lacteals and lymphatic capillaries that absorb fats and transport them to the blood. So lymphatic capillaries are microscopic, closed-end tubes. So they don't circulate through the lymphatic system. These are more like pipes, drainage pipes. They're thin-walled. Their walls are formed from simple squamous epithelium, and fluid can enter the capillaries. Once it does, that interstitial fluid is now called lymph, and move through those capillaries, and those capillaries will merge into larger lymphatic vessels using many of the same mechanisms that the venous system used to circulate blood. In a lymphatic vessel, or walls are similar to veins, but they are thinner. They're composed of 3 layers: an endothelial lining, smooth muscle in the middle, and connective outer tissue layer. They do have those semilunar valves. The larger vessels are going to lead to the lymph nodes and then to larger lymphatic trunks. So the lymphatic trunks are going to drain lymph from the lymphatic vessels. They're named for the regions they serve. So we have a lumbar, intestinal, intercostal, bronchomediastinal, subclavian, and jugular. And those trunks will drain into ducts, and the thoracic duct is the larger of the two, and the right lymphatic duct is the smaller of the two. Thoracic duct drains much of the larger portion of the body, much more than the right, and the breast drains also to the axillary lymph nodes, which is one of the reasons that cancer surgery can disrupt lymphatic flow, because it's important to collect some of those axillary lymph nodes to determine if that breast cancer has become metastatic. So in summary, we go lymphatic capillary to afferent lymphatic vessel to lymph node to efferent lymphatic vessel, lymphatic trunk, collecting duct, and to the subclavian vein. So that fluid is now called lymph. It started out as interstitial fluid, and it has sampling of everything that was in that tissue. It enters the lymphatic capillary, and that capillary blood pressure is going to filter the water and the small molecules from the plasma. Resulting tissue fluid has about the same composition as blood plasma. It contains water and dissolved nutrients, gases. One exception to that is tissue fluid does not contain large plasma proteins like we saw in blood. The plasma protein should remain in the blood, and that helps to maintain osmotic pressure necessary to try and draw the fluid back into the blood capillaries, keeping it a closed system. So that tissue fluid is basically blood plasma without the plasma protein. Filtration from the plasma normally exceeds reabsorption, so they get a net formation of tissue fluid, and that increases hydrostatic pressure within the interstitial space, and that forces the fluid into the lymphatic capillaries. Once it gets in lymphatic capillaries, we refer to it as lymph, and that also helps prevent the accumulation of excess fluid, which is known as swelling or edema. Lymph inside the lymphatic vessels has a low hydrostatic pressure, like venous blood. So good lymphatic flow is going to require help from several different mechanisms, some of which we saw in the venous flow. Contraction of skeletal muscles will kind of milk the lymph along. Respiratory processes will create low pressure in the thorax, high pressure in the abdomen, send the lymph from the abdomen to the thorax. And smooth muscles in the larger lymphatic vessels can also contract and aid in the flow of lymph. We didn't see that in veins. They have valves in the lymphatic vessels that help to prevent backflow. And lymphatic flow would be highest during physical exercise. So the lymph capillaries are there to absorb dietary fats in certain locations of the body. They deliver those absorbed fats to the bloodstream. They return small proteins that got filtered into the blood capillaries to the bloodstream, and they collect excess interstitial fluid and deliver excess interstitial fluid to the bloodstream. And in the process, they are delivering foreign particles, things they pick up in the tissues, to the lymph nodes where our immune cells can take action. So lymphatic tissues and organs, the lymphatic tissue would contain several cell types, including lymphocytes and macrophages. We have a very important one, the mucosal associated lymphoid tissue, or MALT system, which are unencapsulated lymphatic tissues found in the digestive system, the respiratory system, urinary and reproductive tracts, places where we have mucous membranes. Among those would be tonsils and appendix, which are lymphatic nodules similar to lymph nodes, but they are larger. Peyer's patches are more diffuse, and they are aggregates of lymphatic nodules. They're found in the ileum, the furthest reaches of the small intestine, just before you get to the large intestine. We also have some lymphatic organs, including the lymph nodes, the thymus, and the spleen. So a lymph node is bean-shaped, about 2.5 centimeters long, just about an inch, located along the lymphatic vessels, and they filter pathogens from the lymph, pathogens being things that can cause disease. They have lymphocytes there. Those lymphocytes, B and T lymphocytes, we'll talk about later, are used to attack viruses, bacteria, or parasitic infections. They also contain macrophages. Those macrophages are very good at engulfing or phagocytizing foreign cells, foreign cellular debris, and foreign substances. And they're also going to be very important for presenting those things to the lymphocytes, the T and B cells, to get an immune response going, not just a defensive response. You see there are more vessels coming into a lymph node than there are going out of a lymph node. And that helps to slow the process down. Think of it like setting up a traffic jam. You've got in this particular picture, you've got 4 on-ramps and 2 off-ramps, and even the 2 off-ramps merge into one. So you got 4 times the amount of fluid coming in as you do going out. And that allows for more time for macrophages to pick up things and present them to T cells and B cells, help with defense. Lymph nodes are located around the body. They're not well mapped because they tend to be different in everyone. However, there are some places where most people have collections of lymph nodes, including the cervical region, the axillary region, the supratrochlear region, the inguinal region, pelvic cavity, abdominal cavity, and thoracic cavity. It's important to note we don't have lymph nodes in the or lymph vessels in the central nervous system. Two primary functions of a lymph node are to filter potentially harmful particles from the lymph, and as part of that, they're involved in immune surveillance. Their cells there are monitoring body fluids with macrophages and lymphocytes for the presence of pathogens. Along with the red bone marrow, the lymph nodes are the centers of lymphocyte production, the difference being that lymph nodes and produced lymphocytes are mature lymphocytes. They are not immature lymphocytes like we're going to see produced in bone marrow and maturing in the thymus in the case of T cells. The lymphocytes that are there are attacking various pathogens, and if they are attacking various pathogens, they are, as doing that, they are dividing. So that's why we have production of lymphocytes there. Macrophages in the lymph nodes will engulf and digest foreign substances, including damaged cells and debris. The thymus is a soft bilobe gland in the mediastinum. It's divided into lobes. The lobes contain lymphocytes. Those lymphocytes are progenitor lymphocytes that came from red bone marrow. They are very immature T cells. They are called thymocytes. And some of those thymocytes, through a very complex process, will develop into mature T cells, which are part of the immune system. Those mature T cells leave the thymus and help provide immunity. Thymosins are hormones that are produced in the thymus, and they are involved in stimulating the maturation of T cells, as well as drawing those immature cells to the thymus. Thymus is an unusual gland in that it shrinks as we get older. It's very large in infancy and early adulthood. It's shrinking during puberty, and it's very small in an adult. In the elderly, it's very difficult to find. It has been in some elderly replaced by adipose tissue and other connective tissues. The spleen is the largest lymphatic organ. It's located in the upper left part of the abdominal cavity in most people. Resembles a large lymph node in many ways. Contains venous sinuses filled with blood, and has two overriding types of tissues: white pulp and red pulp. The white pulp is mostly lymphocytes. The red pulp is red blood cells, lymphocytes and macrophages. Remember that red blood cells begin being recycled here in the spleen. And part of the role of the spleen is to filter blood, much like lymph nodes filter lymph. So the major organs of the lymphatic system would be the lymph nodes, the thymus, and the spleen. And I will let you go through these this table 16.1. It leaves off the MALT, which is still a very important part of the lymphatic system, but it's not really an organ. It's more of a diffuse collection of nodes